Welcome to What the Decks, where, over the course of a lunch hour, we take the idea for a deck build from Lunchbox to Deckbox. I'm your host, Skylar, and today we're tackling Exiled Dead plus Breakneck Slaughter, as requested by Wellner, aka the Mad Town Mad Scientist. Uh, so, he has a number of Exiled Dead decks already. He's an individual who always asks the question when a new deck comes out, does it pair with Exiled Dead, right? And he's been working through the backlog too, like analyzing every deck, seeing if it works with Exiled Dead. He specifically asked me to tackle a Breakneck Slaughter build, and I haven't taken a look at his build. He has one ready to go, and we kind of chatted, and it was like, well, do you want me to review this one on the show? Or do you want me to build one blind and we'll see how they compare afterwards? And he was like, I really want to see what you do when you build it blind and how it stacks up against mine. So that's what we're going to do today. But before we jump into that, there's a few things I just wanted to shout out real quick, comments that I received. One of which was on our last week's video. So last week was my slot B, so it's that experimental slot. It was the first time we did, I think, what I'm calling deck duality, where we compare two builds, so one that I built and then one that somebody else built, and we compare them live on the stream. I don't take a look at the other individual's build before the stream, and we see kind of what similarities there are, as well as where we diverge on build paths, and it kind of I think, as I pursue it a little more, will help highlight that there are indeed different build paths, even sometimes when you're trying to accomplish the same goals. Because you could have a different play style, preference. You could want to explore a few different tools that a warband has to offer, which are going to align better with some different objectives. Or the paths could diverge altogether, and you could be going for like a hold build versus an aggro build, or I'm going for true hold, you're going for flex. So that's kind of what that deck duality segment might look like going forward as I try to shape it. Again, that was the first go at it, and that was the Brain Freeze crew. In the episode, we just called them the Brain Freeze crew. But then as I was signing out, I was like, no, we need to add a little flair. So added that kind of orcish charm, including dropping the Eon Freeze. So the Brain Freeze crew. And the message I received there was from Krebel on YouTube. Krebel requested that one of the next builds I do be Grash Rack Despoilers plus Void Curse Thralls. Unbeknownst to Krebel, I was actually already speaking with another individual who contacted me on Discord by the name of Caiaphas Kane, also requesting a Grash Rack Despoilers build. So we're penning that in, and I'll be tackling Grash Rack's Despoilers on July 2nd with Void Curse Thralls. So thanks a ton for reaching out, asking me to tackle a pairing. That's what makes this show work as well as I think it does. It brings a lot of joy to me to explore what people bring forward. And the last thing I wanted to shout real quick is Charsh. So this is Kalen, for those who know Kalen, but goes by Charsh on Discord. Reached out and told me that he was inspired by the Wrathgorn Malevolent Masks episode that we did, and has took to building Wrathgorn with Rhymelock relics as a result of that episode. So that means a lot. I love hearing about the different builds that you're inspired to pursue as a result of the show. So if you ever feel inspired by the show and you want to drop me a line, please do. I love reading that kind of stuff and seeing that ideas are being sparked here. And if you test any of these decks out, let me know how they go. I'd love to hear your experience with them as well. So that's a lot of ado. So let's jump into it. Before we tackle the build today, we have the Hexblood Stalkers field report to dive into. So that kicks off now. And this was a ton of fun. I am curious. Oh, excuse me. But I'm curious how Phil experiment with this warband will go from here. He still wants to try this build out. I don't think he's gotten a chance to. He did make an immediate swap, so he contacted me after the episode and was like, as an immediate swap, I wanted to let you know I'm not going in for Death's Visage. I don't agree. I think that you want the dual potential on Feast of Violence. Oop, I thought I had this loaded up. That's okay. Let's get it loaded in now. But Feast of Violence is the one where you make 3 range 1 or range 2 attacks across 3 different activations. And I was worried that I would feel too limited by Feast of Violence because of the range 1 and range 2 requirements, because the fact that they have to be in different activations. So I'm not getting anything that is reaction to the activation. So I'm not getting like Clackdrop's Bite jumping in here. I'm not getting any range 3. So I'm not benefiting from things like Vitrix's Eye. Maybe I Maskborn somebody in and I need a range 3 fighter. Or because like Maskborn's dropping it on starting hexes, so I might not be able to guarantee myself a range 1 or range 2 attack action. And even if I could, Maskborn is not in that sequence. So there's just a number of reasons why I kind of felt Feast of Violence wouldn't stack up for me in this slot. And I'd love to hear how it goes in that slot, because I did test strictly Death's Visage, and I thought it worked quite well. Now, yes, the ore here, I mean, in both cases, it's dice dependent, right? One of them is you're taking an enemy fighter out of action. That's going to require upgrade. Oh, you know what? A friendly fighter with a mask upgrade takes an enemy fighter out of action. Oh, you know what? I had clocked this as an attack action this entire time for that first bit, but I could actually accomplish this with, like if there's a 1 health left and I've got a mask on Kikitaka, he can just guarantee this with a ping as long as that individual is within 1 of a feature token. Oh, cool. So I didn't even realize that was available to me while I was testing this card. I found that I scored both sides of this about 50% of the time. It was my hardest surge, so I will give it that. Let's see. How many games did we play this across? We played a total of 8 games of Hexblood Stalkers. So that was 2 best of 1s and then 2 best of 3s. Our best of 1s was Into My Local Jake. Oh man, I have to show this. Jake and some of his friends roll each week, or maybe every other week. They have some sort of cadence where they roll a wheel based on like which warbands they have access to between the 2 of them, because I think there's 2 individuals that go in for this, maybe 3 individuals that go in for this. But between the warbands that are available to them, they roll, and then between the universal decks available to them, they roll, and they have to build with that, and they have to try it out, right? And so they did this to have a sense of exploration in the game, similar to what we do here on the show, and try different things out, try ideas that you might not have tried otherwise, see how they work. So when I played this into Jake, he was testing one of those decks, and it was Spike Claws Swarm plus Daring Delvers, and it was really close. I did just edge it out, I think by only a point, but man, did he have me scared. Then the other best of 1 was Crimson Court plus Malevolent Masks. When you hear somebody piloting Crimson Court on the show, there's a good chance it's Jazz, one of the What the Heck's like regular. She's been a staple in this community forever. She actually predates me in the Underworlds community here. And so she's trying something out with Malevolent Masks. So we had a little bit of a mask off there, and again was able to grab that one. So 2 wins to Hexblood Stalkers so far, best of 1s though. And then in our best of 3s, I was up against the Soul Raid with Toxic Terrors, and I take that in 3 games, and Gnarl Spirit Pack with Passive Prophecy, and I take that in 3 games as well. And I won't spoil anything on the Gnarl Spirit Passive Prophecy, because the individual that's playing around with that is trying to cook up some secret sauce there. But it's a very interesting build. to say the least. So it was fun to try to wrap my head around that puzzle. So we had a lot of success with Hexblood Stalkers. That's really cool. And what can we learn from the data? We didn't really play against any hold warbands, any horde warbands. The closest we got to a horde warband, I suppose, was Spike Claw Swarm. I think that they're technically classified. I think it's your general division is horde is 5+, even though 5 feels like it's kind of in that awkward, not really horde zone. Personally, I feel like it's like 6+ is horde, 5 is your awkward middle child, and then elite is 4 on down. Like, it feels wrong to call Soul Raid a horde warband. So it feels a little weird to even call Hexbane's Hunters a horde warband. But I would give it to them, I guess, before I'd give it to Soul Raid. So, anyways, yeah, so we played against a lot of elite strength. So Soul Raid, when you kind of look at the fact that they're going to be invading you, trying to control you with toxins, and they have, you know, their 3 heavy hitters, and then the crab can tango sometimes as well. That's a pretty interesting aggro puzzle to have to play around. The fish can also offer the ability to turn off holding on one of your fighters, so you got to be mindful of that coming up. Gnarl Spirit Pack, even though we had this Passive Prophecy puzzle alongside them, they still bring an element of aggro. They can still dance, and the pilot knew that the pilot was very good at picking the moments where they switched into their puzzle and picking their moments where they switched into just an aggro game plan, since the Starblood Stalkers are relatively squishy. You know, sometimes, you know, best of both worlds would be when those plans would sync up. So that was challenging. And Crimson Core with masks as well. You know, we have an elite 4-fighter warband that are trying a little bit more flex as masks is going to bring to them. But the Jazz was running completed pact there, so she really wanted to murder me and outnumber me. I was really impressed with the Stalker's ability to hold their own. So diving into that a little bit more, one of the things I normally like to do is I cover what objectives I thought worked really well and what objectives I thought were hard to score. So I already mentioned, I think Death's Visage is the one that's hardest to score. The rest were incredibly reliable. Like Instinctive Tactics, I might actually have overloaded the amount of reactions I bring in here, because a card that was doing the least amount of work for me across my games was Menacing Posture. It was never the card I wanted to see, and I never used this reaction when it mattered. So ultimately this surprised me, because I played 8 games and I would have thought over 8 games Menacing Posture would have offered more. And it just didn't. I was able to get into the positions I needed to without it. I was able to, and like sometimes I wasn't even able to push after my activation, because maybe my activation was dealing lethal to my target. Well, I didn't push them, I killed them. So all of a sudden I can't react with Menacing Posture. So I'd actually recommend cutting this card altogether and actually swapping in, what was it called? It was the card that we actually went for it last week, and I thought to myself, I was like, I'm going to, Dark Humor. I was like, we'll see if I regret this. I regretted it. I think the right answer in this slot, Dark Humor, should be factored in here over Menacing Posture. And here you still get to react, right? So if you end up rolling a crit in your defense, and you're re-rolling now, but if you do roll a crit, you get to react. And so that gets the count towards your reaction count for Instinctive Tactics. So I feel like this lives in the same space that Menacing Posture did when it came to frequency towards contributing to Instinctive Tactics. But having the ability to add another source of reroll adds consistency, because we already have that in Herald of the Old Ones. This card is fantastic. And I thought, like, I would rather have that redundancy. I would rather be able to get to more rerolls than have this Menacing Posture card that wasn't doing anything. Astromatrix alignment was fairly easy. My favorite games were when I would have a landing pad just across the line to run to. And then in power, I would stagger myself delving and then play possessive crouch. So anytime I got Astromatrix alignment and possessive crouch in my opening hand, I got really excited because I knew I could attempt that play. Whether I'm attempting that with Kiki Taka or Otapodal or Clocktrack himself would kind of depend on match to match. But this was a favorite like opening draw. I didn't find the Great Plan to be difficult. I think I scored it in all but one game. So I was a little concerned that Death's Visage, although maybe the easier objective, or easier is the wrong word. Like, I feel Feast of Violence can pull bad decisions out of me, can pull like not ideal sequences where I'm focusing on the characters that can contribute those range 1 and range 2 attacks and maybe not putting them exactly where I'd like them. Death's Visage, like, it can be harder to score, but with range 3 allowing me to contribute those to it, it feels like it frees me up to focus more on the rest of these objectives, which is why I ended up really liking this one. But overall, I was just really glad that I didn't feel the absence of Feast of Violence when I was trying to score the Great Plan. Children of Zir was my favorite of the upgrades in here, or objectives in here, specifically the end phases. And this was generally the duel that would do the trick, but Totally Overpowered was really reasonable as well. Maskborn helps with Totally Overpowered and helps with Death's Visage. Maskborn can help you get a kill on Death's Visage, can help you get an attack count. Meanwhile, like, just being able to pop up and insert some extra damage out really helps. Being able to use Taking Over for Vitrix's Eye, or or using it on often on Frostbitten Veil was the way I ran, because if this was on Clocktrack, that was scary because you're rerolling both his main attack and his bite. But if you put this on Otapodal, you get to reroll 3 dice looking for crits, and that's really fun too. And when he's inspired, he's also doing 2 damage with that. And Cleave and Ensnare, if you can get any supports in there. I found, like, Otapodal in one game in particular just became like a turret takedown. Like, I think he took 2 fighters down and did another 2 damage to a 4 health fighter. So don't underestimate what Otapodal can do for you, especially when you can reroll all of those dice. That was a bit wild. Yeah, I mean, overall, really positive feelings about this. I really liked Sotek's Venom. I think Sotek's Venom is so good in the current Nemesis environment. Anytime I could stop a key fighter from having access to a charge and worry less about the damage that could bring to me, or in latter rounds when I could prevent charged out entirely when I'm up against these, like, elite warbands, that was really helpful. So you have this inherently with Otapodal, but it's kind of like doubling down on that strength. Again, consistency, redundancy. So was a huge fan of that. There's only good things to be said about Burst from the Shadows, Huanchi's Device, and Lords of Space and Time. Anytime I had Burst from the Shadows or Lords of Space and Time in my opening hand, I knew I had a lot of play that had opened up. I loved seeing them. Lords of Space and Time is fantastic too, with just Hooded Stranger or Will of the Salon. So it felt like a pretty tight deck. I know, I think the last things I'll address here is Spawning Bond was something I didn't know if it was going to be, like, more cute than good. This was really great. Sometimes, if a fighter skittished, then I could, like, do a nice little repositioning dance with another fighter. Maybe that would instantly score me Instinctive Tactics. Another time, Burst from the Shadow is pushes as well. So you could combo Spawning Bond with Burst from the Shadows, and all of a sudden you're pushing 3 fighters instead of just 2. And I think the mask ratio is just right with Unveiled Ambitions. Part of me was curious if I should get rid of if I should have gotten rid of Menacing Posture for another mask. And I think that that's a play that you can make, but ultimately I think I land in Dark Humor being the one I grab. So there we go. There is our field report for Starblood Stalkers. Only one card difference that I would make as far as a recommendation goes. If I were to play these again tomorrow or later today, I'd absolutely be making that swap myself. So on to Exiled Dead plus Breakneck Slaughter. Grab your sandwich. I hope you're hungry for some deck building and that sandwich. All right. Because we're strapping in for some good building exercise here. This is going to be difficult and interesting, and I'm hoping to see some fun stuff come out of this. So let's clear our deck plate here. Nemesis and Exiled Dead. Oop. Missed the Exiled Dead. There we go. Refresh. So let's add a card so that we can take a look at their fighters. Let's tackle the fighter breakdown real quick. We're going to leave this one fairly simple. I'm going to let the kind of two groups here speak for themselves. So there's two groups of fighters that you can break Exiled Dead down into. And I'm going to inspire the two right out of the gate that are paired together. So this is Markov and Regulus. Markov is kind of like your Igor character for those familiar with that on Igor himself undead. I guess I'm not familiar. Either way, call back to Frankenstein's monster, I believe. Yes, we'll go with it. Confidence, Igor. So he is Diantelos's like assistant. Markov is. He kind of looks up to Diantelos, I imagine, and sees the work that Diantelos is doing, because Diantelos's crew here is the other four, right? So anytime Diantelos activates in this game, he has a chance to an opportunity at that time to activate 4 other fighters alongside him, moving 5 fighters or attacking with 5 fighters. We'll dive into that just a little bit. But first, with Markov here, he kind of looks up to that. He wants to be able to like learn from Diantelos and be as good as Diantelos, or at least make Diantelos proud. Again, as I imagine. And so Regulus is his pet project. And my favorite paint jobs are when you see Regulus with a little bit of shine on his shield and armor and stuff like that, because I like to think that like Markov is just so proud that like he also takes the time to like keep Regulus looking resplendent, whereas Diantelos is like instead, you know, he's more about like I can make these, like these are tools, like as long as they're serving my function, I don't care, you know, sort of a deal. And if they fail me, maybe I can bring another one together. But narratively, that's kind of how I feel about these individuals. My understanding is that the magic that is being performed here, if you will, magic science, is so abhorrent to even Nagash himself that Nagash has exiled Diantelos for his practices, hence Diantelos the exile. So all of that is realized in these 2 actions on Prentice Markov and Diantelos. Markov has Puppeteer action. This fighter and a friendly Regulus can each make 1 action, then place up to 1 friendly out of action Regulus in an empty hex within 2 hexes and give that Regulus 1 raise counter. Reactions cannot be used during this action. Okay, so this is the card text that you're going to see on your card. This has been errated, so keep that in mind. In fact, for Diantelos, I'll just read it straight from the errata here. But Prentice Markov, the changes are, you know, super actions are okay. They were okay when he launched because the game core rules wording around how that worked was different then. And so super actions were just kind of automatically assumed by the wording of Puppeteer. They've been brought back with an errata to maybe an unintended consequence. Or maybe a nerf that was kind of tried out for a second. But ultimately, it was decided to give it back to Markov and Regulus here. So when you choose the Puppeteer action, you can choose whether you're performing actions first with Markov or Regulus, and those can be any action that they have available to them. Once Markov has a charge token on him, though, he's not activating as a fighter again in the future unless you can figure out a way around that. And then Diantelos, change the dance dynamic ability. So this is the ability that we're going to be reading to read as follows: action, pick, move, or attack. Each friendly conductive fighter can make one action or super action. They have scything, so again, we needed to clean this wording up. If it is a scything attack action of that kind. So pick a move or an attack, and then each of Diantelos plus the 4 that I currently have uninspired here are able to make that move or that attack action, or one of that kind. And then place up to one friendly out of action conductive minion in an adjacent hex, 2 or more hexes from each enemy fighter, and give that minion 1 raise counter. So you'll notice if Markov's performing Puppeteer and Regulus is off the field, by the time he's completely resolved Puppeteer, he's had an opportunity to bring Regulus back. Same goes with Diantelos. So that's something that we're going to want to keep in mind as we're working on this build, is we can bring all of the minions back. We can't ever bring Diantelos and Markov back, though, which makes a lot of sense. They're linchpins. Now, the other thing that the Exiled have going for them is each of the minions start inspired. Yes, this fighter begins the game inspired. I wasn't sure about Regulus, but I had to double check. So if they're ever killed, then they... So Unbound, I wonder why Unbound isn't in blue over here. That's odd. Now I want to see like a physical card. Is that the case there? They all have Unbound. So if they all die, or any of them die, then they're going to be uninspired once you give them a raise counter to bring them back. So they're dead. They're sitting, on top of their card, and then when you raise them back, you'll also flip them over to the uninspired side. And we have some abilities that are going to be important to us while we deck build here to keep in mind. Overload, +1 damage to this attack action if the target is staggered. So we want to think about how we can stagger our enemy fighters, because each of the conductive minions have overload. So they have the opportunity for plus damage when we're dealing with stagger. I think that's going to be something that we try to lean into here. And then when they're uninspired, they have arcs. +1 dice to this attack action for each conductive fighter adjacent to this fighter. So whoever's hug and coil when he's making the attack from your conductive crew over here can add plus dice to them, regardless of whether the adjacent fighter is inspired or not. All right, from Regulus, from Regulus, I say. From Wellner in chat, can confirm Regulus doesn't have the blue text since he doesn't have special abilities unless you count a 2/2/2 profile. Fair enough. Well, I think we can kind of jump out of the fighter coverage here. Diantelos and Markov both get quite a bit stronger as far as their attack opportunities when they inspire. They always stay at a level 2 and a level 1 wizard respectively, from Diantelos to Markov there. And that's what we need to know to dive in. So for those unfamiliar with Breakneck Slaughter, that's going to be our pairing today. Let's just refresh everybody on the Impetus card real quick. This is, it's not really the Impetus card. It's just what I'm calling it. It's their plot card. The Breakneck Slaughter plot card. All right, so I've got everything loaded in. So view plot card. Impetus, +1 move to each fighter that has 1 or more momentum counters. So if we can get momentum counters to people going into their activations, then they're going to have +1 move if we perform any sort of move action. After the reaction step that follows an activation step, for each fighter that has 1 or more momentum counters, that fighter player picks an opponent. Then there's a bunch that's written here about placing a scatter token on the board. You don't have to worry about that. What you're doing is you're counting how many counters they have, and then you're pushing them in a consecutive straight line that many of hexes. So If you have somebody with 2 momentum counters, then you pick an opponent. That opponent's going to take that fighter and push them in one direction 2 hexes away. Now, if that fighter cannot be pushed into a hex, that fighter is not pushed, and stagger that fighter instead. All right. So if we can, like right away, we already know that we want to be staggering our opponents so we can access to +1 damage from overload on our inspired zombies. So maybe we can offload some momentum to our opponent and then smash them into our zombie wall and stagger them. We'll see. Let's dive straight into surges. Now, when we're building with Exiled Dead, we have an extremely rough objective pool. I actually think it's why we don't see more of Exiled Dead is they have to bring a lot of a pairing with them, and they have to overcome a lot of glory bleed. So whenever you're piloting or building, with Exiled Dead, you're kind of overcoming 2 inherent disadvantages that you're starting with. One is a bad objective pool that you have to take what you can from and make work, and then the glory bleed, because you have to also find enough glory to overcome that bleed. So those will be some of our challenges as we're building and piloting this deck. This is the type of deck where we want to push the glory ceiling maybe a little further than we would, just because we might need the opportunity to get those high scores, and we can't afford to hang out at 14 glory. Like, that'd be bad, because if they're able to kill each of our zombies at least once, like our 2 healthers, we're already 4 glory down, and they only need to, if our ceiling's 14 and we're not getting kills, then they're 10 away from their ceiling, and they've got 12 cards to help them get there. So here we go. We're going to start again with surges, alternating strikes being an amazing one for them. So there we go. The site is freaking out a little bit. I kind of like that the filter is still here, but it's weird that it's only partially here. Is it going to keep hanging out? Oh, sweet. Okay. Well, sure. Is this a feature or a bug? Who knows? All right. Alternating strikes. Score this immediately after an activation step in which 2 or more friendly fighters each made 1 or more attack actions. So easiest surge possible. We're just making 2 attack actions. So you should be able to do this because Diantelos has a range 3 attack when he decides to dance dynamic and choose attack. So hopefully you have 1 zombie lined up and then maybe his range 3. A cool trick with these guys is you can always use drive back and knockback to help you position the target that you're hitting to get them into another zombie who might not have been able to attack otherwise. Now they can attack. So as long as you're able to get 2 attacks off, and like Markov and Regulus could just both charge, you're going to be able to score alternating strikes. So that is our easy start. Appalling End. Score this immediately after a friendly minion's attack action that took the target out of action. Our minions are going to be doing most of the work for us. It's really not going to be Markov or Diantelos, preferably. So, yeah, Appalling End is another good surge. Didn't you say their objectives are terrible? Don't worry, we're getting there. Direct Strike. Score this immediately after a friendly fighter's attack action that deals 3 or more damage. We might actually entertain this one in Breakneck Slaughter. So what we're looking at is nobody that can do that naturally, right? So let's get to our inspired sides because that's more representative of the start of the game. So even when these 2 are inspired, they're not doing it unless he gets a nice Grievous hit up. But doesn't this have... Hold on. Does this have any fighter restrictions? Nope, just friendly fighter. Okay. So Markov could do it with Grievous. Maybe. So we could always inject +1 dice cards into our pool. We probably will. Otherwise, we're relying on Overload to do it. And specifically to do it with Coil. So that's kind of rough. Otherwise, if we can get some +1 damage sources in here, we have at least one available in Breakneck Slaughter that could help make this surge possible. We'll see. That's only, I mean, before the game really gets going, you really only have like Coil plus a card to help you make this happen, or Regulus plus a card to help you make this happen. So this is kind of a poor early game surge. So we're hoping to cut it if we can. Dread Puppetry. Score this immediately after a friendly Regulus is given a raise counter. I find that unless you lean into constantly using Regulus and making sure they take him down as a fighter, then you're gonna have a hard time scoring this. I know Wellner hates this card, so he said that like people just don't go after. They just really don't go after Regulus. So he does get much weaker. He goes down to 2 swords once he's uninspired. But maybe a lot of players can manage him, or maybe that's just not a good use of your actions, right? You know, if you're focusing on Markov and Regulus, you're really only cheating the action economy one additional fighter. Whereas if you're activating constantly with Diantelos, you're cheating action economy, you know, at potentially 4+ fighters. So I can see why Wellner would find this limiting. Also, in a best of 3, if I'm up against Wellner, I'm going to spend a lot of time after I've learned in game 1 that this is in my deck, not trying to kill Regulus, trying to avoid that as much as possible and just kind of manage his existence. So you could lean into that, or you could lean away from it. We're probably going to try to lean away from it here. Beat to the punch. Score this immediately after a friendly fighter's successful attack action. If that was the first successful attack action made in this phase, this is going to be bad for us because we need to get into position. And so, like in round 1, there's almost no way that we're going to get the first attack action off. And in subsequent rounds, we're then relying on already being in position. We're relying on dice rolls. So beat to then win the roll off. So beat to the punch is out. Crashing Assault. I think this is the card that I dislike the most in this deck, I'm pretty sure. Score this immediately after an activation step in which a friendly fighter with 3 or more momentum counters made 1 or more successful attack actions. Yeah, I dislike this card a lot. I just feel, I just feel that unless you're leaning super hard into momentum, and even then it can feel pretty limiting on how many opportunities you have to make this happen. It can also force cards out of you that would have been better used in other spots on a gamble. Like you're just using them to really fuel up that momentum, and that'll come with its own benefits. That comes with your, move, but like it could come with plus damage, plus dice, but it's all putting it into a bet. And if that bet fails, how many other opportunities each round are you going to get where you can crank that up to 3 or more momentum? And I don't like that, especially as a surge. I want to try to focus on scoreability in round 1 with surges whenever I can. And this is requiring a lot of combo pieces, upgrades to stand it up. So at best, this is late game, but always a gamble. Gale Force, really good. Score this immediately after your Warband's 3rd or subsequent attack action in the same phase. We can instantly score this like with a really well-placed dance. Part of me is curious as if this was the initial like spark of curiosity, like, ooh, another card that I can treat like alternating strikes, but it's like 3 attacks instead of 2. I can score both of these, in my first couple of activations in a game. Maybe that's where like that initial spark came from for Wellner. Everybody grabs Gale Force. It's a good card, but here it is interesting, just in how much you can get going. Not fast enough. Surge Duel. Score this immediately if a friendly fighter's attack action takes the target out of action, and that enemy fighter had 1 or more move and or charge counters. I like this card. I've heard, so I don't like play Breakneck Slaughter often. In fact, I think the only Breakneck Slaughter build we've done on the show was Headsman's Curse. I really enjoyed it, but generally I just don't lean aggro. That's just not my playstyle. So it's rare I lean into grabbing Breakneck Slaughter or Tooth and Claw, and even sometimes Daring Delvers. Of the three, I'm more inclined to grab Daring Delvers just because there's a little different pathing in there between like the ping package it brings and the exploration, and some other items. Like, for example, I love the Zone of Control. It's one of my favorite cards in Gnarlwood. But regardless, I've heard that people can struggle with Not Fast Enough, can find it to not be like a favorite card. I almost kind of hope it makes it into this test build. Like, I could end up justifying it just so I can test it a little more. I don't know. I don't know that it's bad. Like here, like I can totally understand where like the target that you want to take down hasn't moved or charged yet. And if I'm up against Breakneck Slaughter, I can even consider like, oh, I haven't seen Not Fast Enough yet. You know what? Maybe I'll leave this vulnerable fighter for a moment so that it's not an attractive target for Not Fast Enough, and I'll attack with somebody else. I feel like most of the time, I still want to get mileage out of that fighter. So I'm probably still going to go for the attack anyways. But anyways, that's all to say. I kind of want to test this card. And I think with the zombies, once somebody charges, that becomes a target that I can pile up on. So maybe I have to dance twice. And there's a lot of tempo to playing Exiled Dead. Very often that tempo is one activation, move into position, second activation, take my dance attacks. Especially if you're leaning into Dianthelos and his gang. So we're going to try it. We're at 5. We're hoping to cut Direct Strike if we can. Out of Control, you resolve the impetus ability for an enemy fighter, or the impetus ability staggers a friendly fighter. I love this card. I think this card is super fun because you don't even need to bring it for people to be scared of it. When they're making their impetus decisions, there are like it's reasonable to not stagger a fighter, even though it might be advantageous to you, because you're nervous of giving them that seed glory with Out of Control. And so I've seen players, like I know, for example, Saxtum doesn't run Out of Control in his Domitan's Breakneck Stormcoven because he doesn't have to. Like, the mind game is there from the start. But I really like it, and I think we might lean into trying to hand impetus over to our enemy and resolving it that way. Wild Impetus. Score this immediately after the impetus ability is resolved for a third or subsequent time in the same phase. So if we keep momentum going, like as a theme, then we just need to make sure momentum makes it across 3 different turns. I don't know if this is good or bad in this build. We will see. So I think it's probably going to come down to, do we cut Wild, Impetus, Direct Strike, or both? That would knock us down to 5, but sometimes, very rarely, sometimes 5 Surge is better than 5 Surge and a bad 6 Surge. If you think that just getting a kill, like just taking a fighter out of action, is easier than that 6 Surge that you're looking at, then maybe don't bring it. And maybe think to yourself, my 6 Surge is taking a fighter out of action. This was something that Wellner and I did with Exiled Deads when we were looking at, I don't mean to take any credit here. We just talked a lot about this build. This is ultimately his build, and I advised, that same thing when he was working on his Masks build. And sure enough, he ran 5 Surges and 7 end phase. And that felt like the right answer after he was testing it. So that's kind of a cool decision point that you can land in sometimes. I say cool, but at the same time, you're begrudging of all of those other warband pairings out there that are just totally comfortable grabbing like an easy 6. It's like, I really wish I could join that club. But you can't. Exile Dead. Deal with it. You're exiled for a reason. So Let's move on to end phases. Are there any third? No. Okay. I couldn't remember if Meat Locker had that on it. So we're going to sort this by glory, and we're going to see how greedy we can get. Because, again, we're going to try to push this ceiling. So Meat Locker, score this in an end phase if each surviving enemy fighter is in enemy territory and each surviving friendly minion is in enemy territory. This is something that we're going to entertain. This card is tough, but the payoff is huge, and it does put pressure on your opponent to constantly play around it. One problem with that is where you position Diantelos. So if you want them to stay out of your territory, then you probably have to bring Diantelos into their territory, because if you leave him in your own and you're puppeteering from there, right, or dance dynamicing from there, then you're not only putting the linchpin fighter, the most attractive target, like on his own, but you're putting him in the place, you're inviting them, like they want to kill Diantelos, you're inviting them to come and spoil Meat Locker while doing the thing that they want, which is killing Diantelos. So when running Meat Locker, I think you often have to take Diantelos along for the ride. Anytime you can like do a max offset of 4 hexes and kind of block it off with the minion line that you have, that's something to explore as well. But if they have ways to push and break that line, things can get hairy pretty quick, or if they have flying. So a couple of notes about Meat Locker there from my observations with it. But it stacks really nicely with fastest around. Each surviving friendly fighter is in enemy territory, and there are no enemy fighters in your territory. So here's the question. Fastest around is actually more demanding than Meat Locker is. We have to get Markov and Diantelos over there. Now, we probably already want Diantelos over the line to help us with Meat Locker, but fastest around, so if you run both, you kind of put that pressure on them always. And if you, hey Ben, caught me live, absolutely. Welcome to the show. And Ben's a good friend of mine. We chat a lot of Underworlds. So awesome seeing you in chat. Okay, fastest around. Score this in end phase if each surviving friendly fighter is in enemy territory. So again, just that puts a lot of pressure on Diantelos and Markov here to join the party. But we're kind of threatening 2 different ways to score this early. I personally think that is too like easy for them to plan around, and fastest around is too hard. So I know I kind of started this with stacks nicely. I guess I just wanted to talk about the parallels. And I think there is a build path where you grab both, but I don't think I'm a fan of it. I think you stick with Meat Locker, and fastest around actually gets cut here, because if I learn as your opponent that you have both, then I'm going to focus way more on just making sure that that's always true, that I have somebody in your territory and I am just preventing both. Now, Hurricane Force is a different story. Double Hurricane Force to Electric Boogaloo. So I know Wellner has, with Tooth and Claw, run Hurricane Force here. So each surviving friendly fighter is in enemy territory, and there are no enemy fighters in your territory. Hold on. I thought there was some difference. There's no difference. Okay. Wellner, you're a madman. You very much so are a mad scientist. I'm not for it. I don't know how you score them. I feel like in a best of 1, sure. But in a best of 3, as soon as I know that I just need to get 1 fighter over the line, and like I'm ruining it in 2 different ways, because either 1, I'm just there and I'm ruining it, or 2, you then have to spend time coming in and addressing me, which is forcing you to ruin it for yourself a little. So we get a smiley face from him in chat. Okay, so on to our 2 bangers here. So Stench of Dynamism. Score this in an end phase if your warband casts 3 or more spells in the preceding phase. Let's take a look at spells real quick. So we have a spell attack action built into Antelos. So anytime that dances attack, we can we can hopefully get in with this range 3 spell. So that contributes. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4 spells available to us. So at minimum, I would want to bring 3 of these along for the ride in order to try to cast that card. I think that card can be extremely difficult to cast or to score. And if we leave a focus result at home, we would. So I don't really want to jump into spells quite yet, but between having a spell attack action and a number of spells, I think we can consider it. So let's just toss it into the mix. Eager for the fight. Score this in an end phase if each surviving friendly fighter has 1 or more charge tokens and or is within 2 hexes of 1 or more enemy fighters. Man, this is demanding. So you're managing 7 fighters here. Now, with a dance, you can probably make this relatively true for the D'Angelos crew on the within 2 hexes of 1 or more enemy fighters. And then you probably have to make sure that you're using Puppeteer to also charge. This is tough. We're going to consider it, though. We're going to be pressed for options. I promise, especially as we get into theirs. Like, look, they're offering 1 glory on most of their stuff, even though like they're coming with a ton of glory bleed. So we're going to need some heavy hitters. So we might have to take on some hard objectives and just figure out what our game plan is for scoring them. Rapid Strike. Score this in an end phase if the number of enemy fighters out of action is equal to or greater than the round number. I don't think that you build a Breakneck Slaughter deck and you don't bring this card. This card is phenomenal. It's 1 kill in round 1, 2 in round 2, 3 in round 3, and it's a cumulative. That's not kills that you got specifically in that round. It's just counting at that time. Are there 2 out of action in round 2? Oh yeah, there are. Perfect. So for 2 glory, we're definitely bringing that. Running Rings. 2 or more friendly fighters are adjacent to 1 or more enemy fighters in enemy territory, and 2 or more of those fighters each have 1 or more move and or charge tokens. This is the easy Breakneck Slaughter end phase here. Well, nerd taunting. GW is scared of our power. If we had good objectives, that's why they starve us so. Indeed. And Ben commenting in on eager for the fight. It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off. So Running Rings, again, is going to be our easy Breakneck Slaughter objective. So we've grabbed 2 end phases that I'm pretty excited about in this build. And they're both offering us 2 glory. That's pretty awesome. The rest bring their challenges, and we're going to have to manage those challenges as we tune this build. So let's keep going. Now we're on to just 1 glory payouts. So this is what we're working with. All right, Dynamic Chain. Each surviving friendly conductive fighter is adjacent to 1 or more other friendly conductive fighters, and those fighters are in a single group. Okay, so we could have a line. We could have a line of them. We could have a group of them. It's as long as each of our conductive fighters. Oh, hold on. D'Angelos is conductive. He's got to be a part of this group? Yes. And those fighters are in a single group. Okay. Because D'Angelos has to specifically be touching this group, I think that's a lot of positioning asks, and it's going to detract from some of our other positioning asks, especially if we stick around with eager for the fight. So Dynamic Chain for 1 is out. Forbidden Lore. Score this in end phase if each surviving friendly fighter has 1 or more charge tokens and or 1 or more move tokens. Yeah, I think that's possible. That's perform Puppeteer once, perform Dance once. Now, the thing that can be the rub here is if you want to raise a minion, you might not be able to. You kind of have to weigh, like, is raising that minion right now more valuable than scoring Forbidden Lore or vice versa? Because when they get raised, they're not going to come in with move tokens. So that's something to consider with Forbidden Lore. But so far, I'm on board with it as one of our oneer options. Score this in an end phase if one or more friendly fighters each have 2 or more move tokens. Hold on, 1 or more? Each have 2 or more? I mean, we're picking this, and we're picking this over Forbidden Lore every day. So that's the answer so far. Mobile resistors. Score this in an end phase if each surviving friendly conductive fighter is adjacent to 1 or more other friendly conductive fighters, and 1 or more of those fighters is on an objective. Okay, so we have to make groups again. In this case, they can be grouped together. But if we lean into impetus happening, then we're going to give our opponent plenty of opportunities to split up our groups. So let's leave mobile resistors out and focus again on some of our other positioning requirements instead for higher payouts. Strict Tutor. Score this in an end phase if a friendly Markov casts 1 or more spells in the preceding phase. Man, I hope so. This should only be true when he dies, or untrue when he dies. I hope. And the Dead Unbound. Score this in an end phase if 1 or more surviving friendly conductive minions are uninspired. That feels even easier. So we've lost 1 fighter at one point in time, and the game is giving us a glory back for bringing them back. Thank you, game. Need for Speed goes into end phase if each surviving friendly fighter has 1 or more move and or charge tokens. So that's Force Dynamic. No, Forbidden Lore. Yeah, that's Forbidden Lore. So that's a copy of that. And then Too Slow. Score this in end phase if your warband has more move and charge tokens combined than 1 or more other warbands each have move and charge tokens combined. So we'll grab Too Slow as well. Let's get rid of Strict Tutor since it is dice required, and let's get rid of Forbidden Lore. We have 3 good 1 options, and frankly, I don't want more than 3 oneers. Man, I hope we can cut at least 1 more of those. I hope we can present good cases to keep some of these higher payouts. But these are 3 really reliable 1 glories. So I'm happy with those selections. On to spells. Let's go straight to spells. All right. So let's talk about the double one here. So Dance of Diantelos. Now, this card is like high risk, high payout. In a flat pairing, both spell cards go in, but yeah, they bad. From Welder. Like, when he said flat, he meant Force of Frost. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, Stench of Dynamism is paying us 2 glory. So I really want to think about it. Like, are the spells worth bringing? Now, Dance of Diantelos is not one that we can rely on to help us score Stench of Dynamism, but it is one we can bring along. But we don't want to count it towards our spell count. As odd as that sounds, it's because we're looking at these 2 exact results. Obviously, crits are wilds in our dice rolls, but if this goes off, it's massive. Like, the reward for scoring this card is strong enough to bring it along. Like, a lot of the times you'll get dissuaded by 2 dice results being required to cast a spell. So the payout needs to be totally worthwhile if it goes off. And being able to dance, which is what this does. So each friendly inspired conductive fighter can make an action of the kind you picked, move or attack. So being able to sew in an extra dance out of sequence is just so good. It changes the tempo entirely. So it is something that we're going to try to bring. But let's take a look at the other spells. So Channel Dynamism. If cast, each friendly conductive fighter's move characteristic is 4. This effect persists until the end of the phase. This is huge. because we're looking at 2 movement speed. So 3 at the start, because we start inspired, and then we go down to 2. So to be able to bump ourselves up is pretty strong. Dance with the old caveat of no reactions too. It's huge. Oh, and there's a little bit of trade-off here. So players cannot use reactions while the spell is being resolved. That is big. You're not able to do scything attacks though during this, which is, at least I don't think you can. I could be wrong on that. I'll look into that for you, viewers, and I'll get back next week. Well, if you know the answer, feel free to hit it in chat. I'll highlight it. But I think with the way that this is written, pick move or attack, make an action of this kind you picked. I'm not sure if that allows scything. I could be wrong. That distinction got a little harder across some different wordings. Channel dynamism. Yeah, we're gonna bring this, or at least we're gonna try to bring this, because being able to upstep our movement from 3 to 4 is really big. When people see your move values, they see limitations, and as soon as you break those limitations going into your turn, it is unexpected. It is not what they saw coming. It is not what they accounted for. And then the fact that this also is going to crank anybody that's been uninspired and are down to 2 move up is huge. It's going to help us with things like Meat Locker, Eager for the Fights, and Running Rings. So this is big. We want to try to keep this card if we can. So we have 1 towards our spell count. Are we going to bring all of the rest of them? From Wellner, this is going to be a comment on if scything's allowed here, I'm sure. I believe it does, since scything is a keyword on the attack, but I'm not 100% since I'm the only madman who runs the card. Yeah, that's fair. So I'll double check on all that. As soon as I know, I'll add a comment to this YouTube video, but I'll also mention it in the field report when we tackle that in 2 weeks. Necrotic Curse, and then I'll come back up to Corpse-like Globe here. If cast, choose 1 enemy fighter within 4 hexes of the caster, deal 1 damage to the chosen fighter, and stagger that fighter. Then deal 1 damage to the caster. I'm a fan of this card. I know Wellner is not. And the reason for that is because you're dealing 1 damage to the caster, and this is your linchpin fighter. So often, right? Like, this is very likely coming off of your leader, so Diantelos, at 2 spell dice instead of coming off of Markov at 1 spell dice. And you always have that option to pivot over to Markov, but you're trading a damage, right? You're handing 1 out and you're gaining 1 yourself. But I also like that it does stagger. It's going to be able to elevate your overload. And frankly, like, just a pocket damage, I think is just good. Like, this could help if you're chip damaging somebody and you just need 1 more damage down for rapid strike. Like, I'll take the 1 damage on the chin to help me score a rapid strike. Excuse me there. All right, Corpse-like Globe, Gambit spell for focus. So the first one for focus, if cast, choose 1 enemy fighter adjacent to 1 or more friendly conductive minions. You can re-roll 1 attack dice in attack rolls for friendly conductive fighters. Attack actions that target the chosen fighter. This effect persists until the end of the phase or until the chosen fighter is taken out of action. So it's kind of like a stagger, right? It's granting you that re-roll. I don't know if stagger was actually out yet. I could be wrong. It came in Harrowdeep or Nethermaze. Probably Harrowdeep. So stagger must have... Yeah, of course it's out. Duh. Necrotic Curse here. That's when it entered the game. Was here in Harrowdeep. So they very intentionally are not counting it as a stagger, but are still kind of giving you the benefits of a stagger here, which means you can double up. If they're staggered and have Corpse-like Globe on them, you can reroll 2 dice against them. We're currently looking at taking the spell package and supporting Stench of Dynamism. That might change. But I'm on board with all of these. I like Dance of Diantelos the least because it is the most unlikely, and I hate having gambits that don't perform. in my deck, but it is, again, I think, worth the payout. So on to, I keep wanting to hit this filter to bring this up, but it's already right here. Habits. All right, ploys. Dynamic Cage. Choose one enemy fighter adjacent to 2 or more conductive fighters. Deal 1 damage to the chosen fighter. So here's a pocket damage for us, as long as this is true, adjacent to 2 or more conductive fighters. And it's not going to cost us 1 damage to D'Angelos, but it's not going to stagger either. This is really good, though. I would be shocked to see a Exiled Dead build without Dynamic Cage. And I think it would edge out what was Necrotic Curse? Name in and out of memory instantly. Reassert control. Choose 1 uninspired friendly minion. Heal to that fighter. Remove that fighter's raise counters. That fighter is inspired. I think the most interesting part here is the fact that you get to remove the raise counter and that fighter is inspired. The problem is this heal is required. You can't heal 0 here, so you have to heal at least 1 to be able to play this card, and you only have 2 health. So most of the time, you're not taking 1 damage, you're taking 2. And so Reassert Control is going to be a card that hangs out in your hand, waiting for an opportunity that might not come. Scorching Surge. Plus 1 damage to the first range 1 attack action made by a friendly conductive minion in the next activation. After that attack action, if it resulted in a critical hit, deal 1 damage to that minion. Yeah, this is great. So we'll be looking to bring Scorching Surge along, and we might. Man, I don't want to find justification to keep Direct Strike, but this does help towards that. Sparking Shuffle. Choose up to 2 friendly conductive minions. Push each chosen fighter up to 2 X's. This is fantastic. This is out of sequence shuffling around to make some extremely valuable dances, and it can go further than that, but often that's going to be its application. Pushes are great. Being able to push up to 2 fighters is fantastic. Sudden Lurch. Reaction. Play this during an enemy fighter's attack action. After the attack roll, push a friendly Regulus up to 3 hexes so he is adjacent to the attacker. So after the attack roll, so you're deciding they can't switch targets onto Regulus, which is kind of nice here. And you're getting a chance to see if a support could really help you before you react, because that's kind of what this is offering. I don't think this makes the cut in the long run, because I can't draw a line from this to an objective. Now this has application, but I don't think this is going to make it in, although I am tempted to try it out. So that's why it's at least jumping in right now. It's kind of probably already my first candidate for cutting, though. Terrible Dynamism. Choose up to 2 friendly conductive minions that are out of action. Place each chosen fighter in a hex adjacent to your leader. Give each chosen fighter 1 raise counter. This is awesome. So this allows a little bit of wiggle room. If you get scythed, you can bring the force back faster. If you need to forgo for whatever reason bringing a minion back, this allows you to fix or like correct that essentially. Now in that scenario though, you want to not have this card in hand already, otherwise you have to hold it over to rounds. This feels good in theory. I'm not sure in practice. Wellner, curious, what are your feelings on Terrible Dynamism? Breakneck Pace. So we're on to the Breakneck cards. Choose a friendly fighter. Give the chosen fighter 1 momentum counter plus 2 move to that fighter in the next activation. I haven't decided yet how much we're leaning into momentum. How much do we have that's asking for it? So momentum really hurts things like Meat Locker and Eager for the Fight and Running Rings with our Warband. So do I try to avoid it? let's see. If I try to avoid it, then I have to lose out of control, because this is only going to work well if I lean into it. And then obviously same with wild impetus. So these two are at risk of getting cut if I don't lean into impetus. And then I'm stuck with direct strike. And I got to make sure to support this. Interesting. Okay. We'll think about it. So we're let's ask ourselves, why Breakneck Slaughter? Like, what is Breakneck Slaughter offering us in this scenario? You know, we could bring Slick Ice. Oh, you know what? Slick Ice is probably hilarious in this deck. All right. In from Jacob here. This is going to be on Terrible Dynamism. It's a very good card. Less for the out-of-sequence res, but for the wall making. It overrides Danny's regular rule that you can spawn adjacent to an enemy, or that you can't spawn next to an adjacent enemy fighter. Oh, okay. That's good to know as well. Cool. All right, so I'm a fan of Terrible Dynamism. Let's try to see if we can't keep it in the stack. Let's go down to Slick Ice. After a fighter's charge super action, that's something we're going to be doing very little of. Give that fighter 1 momentum counter. This effect persists until the end of the round or until another domain gambit is played. Oh, I thought you were calling D'Angelo's Danny. But Dance. Yeah, I hear you. Slick Ice. All right. We're definitely bringing Slick Ice. I want to find room for this card. Because it says, hey, I don't like... I know that your game plan is normally composed of charges, but mine isn't. So enjoy that while I don't suffer negatives. So Slick Ice can really throw a wrench in your opponent's game plan for the round. Man, I'm starting to lean away from impetus is something that we're managing on our side of the field, and maybe focus more on things like Slick Ice where it's their problem now. So, all right, Breakneck Pace, +2 move. This is just to one fighter. This feels like something that we'd make a deep, Regulus decision with. I don't think it's a bad answer, but I'm going to leave it hanging there for a second. Can't stop. Play this after a fighter's activation step. Push that fighter a number of hexes in one direction equal to that fighter's momentum counters, then remove that fighter's momentum counters. So this is allowing you to resolve momentum for yourself before it even gets to impetus resolution stage that it normally would. So you're in total control of where your position is going to be as a result of momentum. We don't have anything granting momentum yet. So let's just keep that in mind. Devastating Charge. Choose a friendly fighter. Give the chosen fighter 2 momentum counters, +1 damage to that fighter's range 1 and range 2 attack actions in the next activation step. If we keep Direct Strike, then we're bringing Devastating Charge along. I want some redundancies to help get us up to that position. Impossible Leap. Choose a friendly fighter. Give the chosen fighter 1 momentum counter. The fighter has the flying trait in the next activation step. I'm not worried about having flying very much on my side. I'm more worried about them having flying on their side. I think we can keep Impossible Leap out. Quick Juke. Play this after the attack roll of an attack action that targets a friendly fighter. Give that fighter 1 guard token and 2 momentum counters. So you get to see the attack roll here. This is generally a really good card because you get to understand how much that guard token could do for you. We are dealing with 1 dice most of the time here, unless we pick up some multiple defense dice benefits in our upgrade section. So that's something we can think about. All right, chiming in from Wellner here again. Remember, it says push that fighter and is in reference to an activation, meaning it's not legal on the zombies, only the dentist and the nurse. Same as frozen to the spot. Frozen to the spot. I don't know. what card we're referencing. Oh, can't stop. Plays after a fighter's activation step. I see. Push that fighter a number of hexes in one direction equal to. Okay, I see what you're saying. So you're saying that D'Angelos and Markov are commonly going to be the only ones that we're activating. Here's a tip for all of those out there. Try and Exiled Dead after this build. You can activate the zombies on their own. I might have just blown your mind there. You don't have to wait for a dance. They can charge on their own. I'm just playing a little bit though. It is available, and frankly, I actually forget that it's available sometimes because you just start roping everything into this like dance bubble or this puppeteer bubble. But at any point in time, you could choose to, just take a single activation with one of these zombies. I think most of the time though, what's going to prohibit you from that is you're going to have a move token on them from a time that they danced. But just a funny anecdote. To right, I've done it, he says. Just keep it in mind. It's there. It's there for you. So where were we at? So we took a look at Quick Juke. Can't stop is totally out of the picture. So thanks for that call out. You're totally right. If this was a fighter's action, just the way that it's written, it disqualifies majority of your fighters when we're using those big action economy abilities. So let's see. Devastating Charge is our plus damage. Quick Juke is potential get out of jail free card. Reckless Charge. No, thank you a ton there for that. Wanted to make sure that interaction was caught since I got a few people at Adepticon for Frozen to the Spot. Yeah, Frozen to the Spot's really interesting, right? If I'm your opponent and I haven't clocked how that's going to impact your zombies and I put Frozen to the Spot on your zombies, that's interesting. I didn't realize it's got to be like after this fighter's activation step in which they Frozen 2. Choose an enemy fighter after the chosen fighter's activation in which they made a move. Yep. Interesting. So it's got to be their own activation. So if you've kind of summarized the card and you don't notice the distinction, that can catch you out. You can think that you're going to be able to take a zombie or punish a zombie with Frozen to the Spot and then find out that it doesn't work that way. All right, Reckless Charge. Choose a friendly fighter. Give the chosen fighter 2 momentum counters, plus 1 dice to that fighter's range 1 and range 2 attack actions in the next activation step. I don't think we're going to have room for this. This is generally a really good card. I'm tossing it at the top just for considerations. We've got a large consideration pool here because we have, frankly, it might not even be large enough. 13. Yeah, let's add a couple more in here, hopefully, because we have so many different objectives pulling us in different directions, and we're still kind of feeling out that momentum part of the picture here. Roll with the punches. In the next activation, when a friendly fighter is the target of an attack action, give that fighter 1 momentum counter, minus 1 dice to a minimum of 1 from that attack action until it has been resolved. So what's really nice here is you're gonna have a good idea when this is gonna matter. Like this card should make it into our deck. Like I would say this card should make it into our deck over Quick Juke, because if you can get a good read on like D'Angelos's and like threat of death here in this next round, you can put Roll with the Punches down, and it's still going to cover whatever they do, as long as they continue to try to attack a fighter. You're not having to choose the fighter that's going to benefit from this. It's just going to be the friendly fighter that is attacked. So I think Roll with the Punches is really good here. I'd take it over the last 2 cards that we selected. Screech to a Halt. Play this after an activation step. Choose a friendly fighter with 1 or more momentum counters. Remove the chosen fighter's momentum counters. So we're able to kind of hold ground. With this build, this is going to be a better option than Can't Stop with the limitations we already discussed on Can't Stop. But I don't think I'm going to need it. This is going to be really good if we lean super hard into that momentum. I'm already leaning pretty pretty far away. And then Sia is similar, right, where we're able to transfer this. But again, here, this is probably the can't stop scenario. Again, play this after a fighter's activation. Choose a fighter adjacent to that fighter, so to the fighter that activated. Remove the activated fighter's momentum counters and give the chosen fighter 1 momentum counter. So you got to be mindful that if we take Sia, we're transferring, if we're puppeteering, we're transferring Markovs. If we're dancing, we're transferring Dianteloses. Otherwise, we got to make sure that we're like choosing a single friendly fighter and intentionally activating them. So I think Sia is Gonski. Goodbye. All right, over to upgrades. Tackling those now. Building an interesting picture here. This is quite the assignment, Wellner. I'm looking forward to testing this out. I always enjoy playing Exiled Dead, both as and against. I think they're a really interesting puzzle on either side of the table. So, converts Zeal, +1 wounds, +1 dice to this fighter's range 1 attack actions. Wellner runs this card, and often that 4 health is just so much of a different ask than 3 health, and that only is it doing that, it's also getting you that plus dice, getting you closer to that grievous result. If we end up keeping direct strike, that's this also helps us get to direct strike if we can get that grievous result. Crackling Field, reaction during an enemy fighter's range 1 or range 2 attack action that targeted this fighter. After the deal damage step, deal 1 damage to the attacker, then break this card. You can use this reaction even if this fighter is out of action. That targeted this fighter after the deal damage step. This would be before the out of action check. You don't actually have to use this reaction if this fighter's out of action. It's interesting. Anyways, this is a pretty like projected damage. So you're presenting a bad bad option, and then saying if you take this bad option, you'll be punished for it. Now the problem here, I think, is that because we're going to constantly be bringing zombies back from the dead, we're kind of just saying don't ever attack this one zombie, and they're probably okay with that because we're constantly bringing back and offering better decisions for them. So you have to be like really skillful with Crackling Field to make sure that either A, this is dissuading them from a target that you are cooking with, or you've put it on somebody that they can't help but take down. They've realized they absolutely have to. So you gotta be really have a really good use case in mind for Crackling Field and how you're going to lure or dissuade your opponent with it. So I'm gonna leave it out. Dynamic Bolt, attack action. So this is for Diantelos. This is another range 3 option. This does 2 damage and staggers. Is this just a strict upgrade of his normal attack? So his normal attack includes cleave. So you're trading cleave for +1 damage here. I find that interesting, and I'm gonna at least put it in the considerations. Dynamic Enhancer, +1 damage to friendly conductive minions range 1 attack actions other than scything attack actions while they are within 2 hexes of Diantelos or Markov. Because we're considering bringing Meat Locker, because we're considering bringing Direct Strike, these all add up. Because we're probably going to be keeping Diantelos pretty close for the purposes of keeping enemy fighters in their own territory towards Meat Locker. And then obviously the +1 damage kind of speaks for itself on how it's going to help Direct Strike. This is interesting. When I've played them in the past, I don't always love this card because of how much it forces my positioning. But I find this to be a pretty good spot for Diantelos to be hanging out a lot of the time anyways. All right, so Dynamic Stabilizer. When a friendly conductive minion within 2 hexes is dealt damage, reduce that damage by 1 to a minimum of 1. In Nemesis, this is pretty big. We're looking at 2 health. That's your average attack. And so without attack buffs, you're saying you're no longer one-shotting my zombies that are within 2. I think the range limitation here might be harder. So here it's offensive. So you're the one who's kind of dictating its use, whereas here it's defensive. And so if they're going for a conductive minion that isn't quite within that space, then they're going to get away with getting that damage down anyways without reduction. So I think if I was going to take one of them, it would be Enhancer over Stabilizer, but Stabilizer does have its benefits, and we'll consider it. Powered command: after an attack action that took a friendly conductive minion out of action, place that fighter in a hex adjacent to the attacker, then give that fighter 1 raise counter, then break this card. This card's phenomenal because I mean, everything it does, it's so good. So being able to get a zombie back into play before a dance instead of after a dance is big. Also, with that placement being directly next to the attacker, this is going to be helpful with positioning, both for what we're trying to score as well as like being able to then attack with this fighter. You're able to immediately attack back without having to get back into position. You do want to be mindful of the fact that you won't have a move or a charge token, and some of our positioning asks also include those, so keep that in mind. Prison of Grief spell reaction: use this after an enemy fighter's activation. So we could count this towards our spell count, by the way. Like, I'd be comfortable counting something like this towards our spell count. Use this after an enemy fighter's activation if that fighter is within 3 hexes. If cast, stagger that fighter. So we're going to get more stagger down, which could potentially get more damage down as a result of things like overload. I think Prison of Grief is really good. Anytime people like try to bridge the gap to Markov or Diantelos, whoever you have this on, if they can't kill you while they're trying to bridge that gap, then there's a good chance that you're able to get a spell off and you're able to stagger them. So I think we might be able to drop a spell in Gambit slot and make room for this, or just double up. We'll see. Spark of Life, Illusion, +1 move, +1 defense to a minion. This is fantastic. We're able to get somebody up to that 2 block, as well as some extra move for when we're dancing around. And it's an illusion, so we're able to put it down right away. The caveat with illusions is they do break at the end of the action phase when this fighter is chosen by a gambit or is dealt damage. So like there's a trade-off, to not having to pay for it. But a tip here is, if you have this in hand and you for some reason didn't use it during the round, maybe you just drew into it, maybe via salvage or something like that, maybe save it for when you're processing your end phase, because the end of the action phase has already occurred. The point in which this would break has already occurred, so you can put it on somebody kind of heading into your next round. So that's something that's available to you. Unfaltering Guard: when an adjacent enemy fighter makes an attack action, they cannot target a fighter other than this fighter. When this fighter is taken out of action, break this card. This can be interesting. Like, I've run this card in Exiled Dead before. So it is restricted to Regulus, which I think is kind of like the weak point here. Like, if it was something that you could put on any minion, there would be a lot more here to this card. But essentially, like, you press Regulus up against somebody who doesn't have a move or a charge token, and you say, like, go ahead. Like if you attack me, hold on. When it makes an attack action, they cannot target a fighter other than this fighter. Oh, you know what? I'm confusing it for a different card. So my favorite Exiled Dead build that I've ever done was a Void Curse Thrall's deck. I had a blast with it. And there's a card in there that is an upgrade and gives a charge token, I think. So apologies. I'm literally reading the card out loud and then melding it in my brain with a different card. Use this after this fighter is the target of a range 1 or range 2 attack action. Give the attacker 1 charge token. This is what I was thinking about, where I pressed a Void Cursed fighter up against a target, and then said, like, go ahead. Like if you decide to take me down, then you're gonna need a charge token, and I've kind of managed your position in that way. Otherwise, I'm forcing you to skip out on me pressed up against you and go for something different. Um, so that's a card I've run before, for a little bit of like cheeky control fuel, but we're gonna pass on Unfaltering Guard. Being restricted to Regulus and Sane, you've got to. They cannot target a fighter other than this fighter. You've got to attack Regulus. This is probably more in here to help you score that Regulus is dead surge. That's probably what this is mostly here for. It's not very good. Sorry for the mislead there. Unfeeling Fortitude, +1 wounds to a minion. We're changing a minion's health value from 2 or 3 if it's Regulus, because he counts as a minion. Yep. Up to 4 or 3. So I'm a fan. Battering Ram, +1 move. After the deal damage step of this fighter's attack action that targeted an adjacent enemy fighter, give the target this fighter's momentum counters. If we were leaning into momentum counters, this would be really big. So far, we've kind of ended up avoiding most of it. It is +1 move. We might entertain this because we do have a couple things that are granting momentum counters, and depending on order, if we're able to get that plus move going as well as this way to offload it, that might be worthwhile. Headlong Sprinter. Some of the plus move in here, though, like it's helping you with your dances and sure some charges if you want to break away from the dance, but it's not helping you like in the same activation that you want to be attacking. So that's something to think about as well. So like here, +2 move. After this fighter's move action, give this fighter 2 momentum counters. This card's probably not good unless we're super leaning into momentum. And so this would impact our zombies too, right? Like our zombies all of a sudden moving 5 or 4 on the regular, but then we're resolving impetus constantly anytime they move. So I think Headlong Sprinter for sure we're going to pass on. Hurricane Dart, because it's breaking up what you're trying to do with that whole turn where you're actually benefiting from those moves. Hurricane Dart, the dice characteristic is equal to 1+ the number of this fighter's momentum counters. I would rather hold on to Dynamic Bolt than go in for Hurricane Dart with where we're at on the momentum picture. Inertial Lance. After the deal damage step of this attack action, give the target one of this fighter's momentum counters. I'm more on board with this because it's a range 2 hammer attack for 2 damage. I think this is just really good on its own. The reaction here is nice as well. Living Hurricane. This fighter's range 1 and range 2 attack actions have stagger. After this fighter's move action, give this fighter 1 momentum counter. This might be worth it. This is worth it. So if we're in a dance and we're in position and we have this card in hand, we have a glory to spend. It's now going into our turn. We put Living Hurricane down, hoping to stagger our target with one of our, or like with that first attack, and then deal overload damage to it with a follow-up attack. So I think Living Hurricane totally has play here, and this will hinder that fighter going forward, though. So that's something that we have to manage, and that might make this a mistake, but we'll think about it. Moving Mark. While this fighter has 1 or more move and or charge tokens, this fighter's defense character is 2 shield, and this fighter cannot be on guard. After this fighter's move action, give this fighter 1 momentum counter. Similar trade-off here. So if we give this to a zombie, then we're cranking them up to 2 shield, probably making them a undesirable target, and you're probably just going to tackle another zombie instead. But we then have to start managing momentum every time they move. The more I run that through thought cycles, the more I'm leaning away from these 2 cards, even though I think that they have their place. You're just constantly going to be using momentum. And then at that point, do we lean back into things like Out of Control and Wild Impetus? But only if we're getting these specific cards. Let's see what our upgrade picture looks like when we're tuning. Standing start, +1 move while this fighter has no move or charge tokens. When you activate this fighter, give this fighter 1 momentum counter. So here's an instance where we can sidestep that. If we give this to a zombie, then their first move has +1, and that could be really valuable. And they're not activating, so we don't have to worry about it. Ooh, important catch on both Moving Mark and Living Hurricane. They both got eroded to only be the first move action to get momentum. Is that per round? That's... Oh yeah, I gotta be careful when we have these errata updates right here. After this fighter's first move action in an activation step, give this fighter 1 momentum counter. Oh, well, that's the same. If this was round, then that would change the math here. But this is still every dance. So this is probably for like the cunning crew. So you can't just like run in circles to build momentum and then like offload that momentum with like hurricane dice or hurricane dart or something like that. Okay, so standing start I think is got some potential value. Translocating step, if this fighter is in an edge hex and not within 1 hex of any enemy fighters, this fighter can use the following action. Give this fighter 2 momentum counters, then place this fighter in another edge hex within 3 hexes of 1 or more enemy fighters. So normally I think this card is terrible. This might be, if this fighter is in an edge hex and not within 1 hex of any enemy fighters, this fighter can use the following action. This might be okay here, but it's just for Markov or Regulus. Within 3 hexes of 1. So you do have to teleport. Like, you can't use this to like really teleport away. This isn't a flee card. This is a get into the mix card. So I could see if like Regulus has been hanging in the back and you've got this in your hand, you can be like, oh, okay, once I get a glory, I can just send him over the line, even though I normally wouldn't have that charge distance from where I'm at. So this can help with something like Meat Locker come together for Regulus. Tumbler, you cannot give this card to a large fighter. This fighter's defense character is 2 dodge, and this fighter cannot be on guard. It's a way to cheat Meat Locker, he just said. Yep, absolutely. This fighter cannot be staggered. So let's see. This doesn't deal with momentum, so I think we're good. This fighter cannot be staggered. In fact, that's nice too. Yeah, 2 dodge can be good. We'll consider that. And then Unstoppable Warrior. While this fighter has 3 or more momentum counters, this fighter has innate sword or hammer. After this fighter's successful attack action, break this card. That's gonna be a pass. We're not dealing that strongly in momentum. In fact, I think I'm going to continue to lean away from it. We've got a good sizable upgrade pool here. I think I'm probably going to tune out a lot of the momentum granters in here. Okay, on to the trim, the tuning, if you will. So if we're getting rid of Moving Mark, we're getting rid of Moving Mark and we're getting rid of Living Hurricane. Living Hurricane I still want to entertain. But let's get rid of Moving Mark for sure. Which is sad. Like, we could use the defense. But I don't think we can manage the constant momentum that we'll be gaining. +1 move while this fighter has no move or charge tokens. When you activate this fighter, give this fighter 1 momentum counter. So we can cheat this. But this is really just kind of like +1 move for one of our fighters. Once. Just once. So, yeah, we'll get rid of standing start. Okay. So I guess we'll continue on with the upgrade side of things. So battery and RAM, I like this a lot. Being able to just have one zombie that's a little more mobile and can potentially shake, like the one from Devastating Charge is nice. I think the +1 move is enough there. Inertial Lance, getting us the extra attack. Living Hurricane, so again, the point here is to stagger somebody early on in the attack to kind of have another shot at doing that, because you're already doing that with Diantelos, hopefully. But we're taking on the momentum counter risk, so right now this is on notice. That might get chopped here. Translocating Step, I do like the ability to cheat a 3-point card. That would otherwise be impossible based on our positioning of Regulus. And Tumbler, getting somebody up to 2 dodge. We're talking, if we want to risk, like especially if they have cleave, maybe we can switch over to dodge, and then we're also on 2 dice trying to get crits. So that can go on to Diantelos. That could be spicy on whoever. Remember, zombies are beasts. Explain. Tell me why that matters, my friend. Usually when I think of beasts... Oh, I see what you're saying. Inertial Lance. You got my back here. So beasts are unable to take on attack profiles. So yeah, that will tune out Inertial Lance here. I would have forgot that. I think I would have forgot that here. And then I've been mindful in my head of the fact that they can't hold objectives, because that's what I always think about with beasts. But they look super ready to hold onto a weapon. So I would have forgotten that these zombies were unable to hang out with my lance. All right, so we only need to cut 2 more. So let's see. What are we looking at here? So Dynamic Stabilizer is, again, that defensive option. I'd like to keep Prison of Grief. Yeah, so I think we're going to get rid of Stabilizer. Just based on what we have left. And then do we tune out Living Hurricane? And I think the answer is yes. I don't think that there's anything I want to give up just for the chance to be staggering with some of these low, here, let me show you. Like, you can swarm, which is going to increase the accuracy on these. And when you're on the arc side, again, you can increase the accuracy with more dice. Actually, I might be talking myself back into it. But I was gonna say, like on this side, if we're at the beginning of the game, we get this in our opening hand. Is it a good spend on our first glory? No, it's probably a better spend on our later glory, because we're looking at like 2 swords and then whatever supports we can get from the attack to get them staggered. I think that's probably a bit of an ask, especially for then taking on that constant momentum problem. So let's get rid of Living Hurricane, and let's get rid of Stabilizer. All right, so we're already through upgrades. Moving right along. I think at this point in time, it's safe to say, unfortunately, that we're going to cut both Wild Impetus and Out of Control. So this is going to be a 5 surge build, and we are keeping Direct Strike, so we'll have to keep that in mind when we're tuning Gambits. We only need to get rid of 1 upgrade, or 1 end phase over here. So we're either cutting down to 18 or 17 glory as our ceiling. That's if we get rid of a 1-pointer or a 2-pointer. Let's try to hold on to Stench of Dynamism. We've been putting a lot into spell capabilities here. Scores in end phase if 1 or more surviving friendly conductive minions are uninspired. Frankly, I think Dead Unbound is probably one of the harder. It's between Force Dynamic and Dead Unbound for a 1 glory chop. So if we feel we can just get rid of some One Glory chaff. It'll be one of these two. But so like Meat Locker, I'm doubling down on. We're gonna play for it. We're gonna try for it. Stench of Dynamism, trying for it. So Eager for the Fight was the other one I identified as potentially being really hard. Score this in an end phase. If each surviving friendly fighter has one or more charge tokens and or is within 2 hexes of one or more enemy fighters, I think this has to be the go. This is going to be so hard having to manage both parties at all time working towards this. You can get your potentially like charges off with Markov and Regulus, but that's only if we've ever had the opportunity to spend activations getting them close enough for that type of work. I think unfortunately we dropped this out and we're down to 17. But if we're going to take this much One Glory end phase, it better be easy, right? And this definitely is. So you have to be scoring your surges, because we can't afford to enter an end phase and not get rid of at least 2 end phase cards. So like we need to be able to knock 3 end phase out in round 1 if possible. And then that gives us wiggle room for 2 end phases kind of in the future per end phase. We're looking at 7, right? And so at some point we need 3 end phase to all score in one go there. Otherwise we're never hitting that full 7. Okay. And then, so we've got our objectives sorted. Gambits. So I'm leaning heavily into spells. So let's see if there's anything else we can kind of pull out first. I think Reckless Charge and Quick Juke are kind of some front runners. This fighter's defense character is 2 dodge, and this fighter cannot be on guard. Devastating Charge we're keeping because of Direct Strike, as well as just the ability to deal some extra damage. Quick Juke, I think, is worse than Roll with the Punches. They both have their place, but I think in this case we'll get rid of Reckless Charge, Quick Juke, so we were able to easily tune 2 out. We have 2 to go. Pocket 1 damage, plus 1 damage to help us with a direct strike opportunity. To push 2 zombies, so we're getting into our position. We're kind of cheating our need to dance into position. Sudden Lurch. I had mentioned earlier that I probably wouldn't find a reason for this. I was thinking maybe this would help like react. This could help put Regulus up faster so that we can then charge with him over the line for Meat Locker. That's kind of the initial thought process here, but I think that's a bit of a stretch when we're looking at needing to cut cards that are offering better value. So Sudden Lurch is gone, and then let's do away with 1 spell. So it's not going to be Channel Dynamism. Being able to get everybody up to 4 is too good. I think it's going to be Corpse-like Globe. Yes, it's offering rerolls, but it's not as valuable as the other 2 to me, and it is on focus. There we go. We have a trim. And another comment here from Ben. I need to edit my Breakneck Slaughter deck. You made me realize I have an attack profile upgrade slated to 5 Goral, but if he's on a spirit counter, which is the plan, then he is a beast. Absolutely. Oh, slated for Goral there. Okay. So the last thing we need to do before we can wrap the show is give this deck a good name. So what names can we come up with today? Feel free to toss any that you have in chat that you think are cheeky, clever, fun. Always, by the way, during the course of a show, if you're here in chat, feel free to be thinking of names, because this question will always come up, and I'm always happy to take in feedback. Like, for example, last week, the Brain Freeze crew was straight a result of Spinnerite, who had already named his own personal version of the deck Brain Freeze, and we went from there. It has to be a thriller joke. Oh, I love that. Yeah, it has to be. Um, okay. Uh, I like where your head's at. Let's take a look at Thriller real quick. Thriller lyrics. Under the moonlight. Da, da, da. Thriller, thriller. Da, da. No one's gonna save you from the beast about to strike. You know it's Thriller, Thriller night. You're fighting for your life inside a killer thriller tonight. Yeah. Um. Oh. Hmm. I like the idea of a thriller joke. I'm not. I thought looking at the lyrics would really bring something forward for me. Uh. I mean, I'm not. I'm not above just calling it breakneck thriller. Uh, but that's not really a joke then, is it? That's just kind of on the nose. Okay, let's see. Dead Unbound. The Dead Unbound, and we're looking at Breakneck Slaughter. Um, uh, Breakbound. No, Breakbound doesn't. There's nothing there. Dynamism. Can we use something? I don't even know what dynamism is. Dynamism is kind of his spell magic, isn't it? Yeah, it's the force dynamic, right? So dynamism is a play on the force dynamic, which is what he's using to, give life to these thralls of his. Sparking Shuffle. I feel like Sparking Shuffle. Oh, Frighter. So one of these cards. Yeah, right here. Score this immediately after an activation step in which two or more friendly frighters each made one or more attack actions. Now, this is not what the physical card says, which I'm sorry to disappoint you on. When I read this originally on Underworld's DB, I believed wholeheartedly that that's what this card said, and it was my favorite typo ever, and you could not convince me otherwise that it wasn't an unintentional fun little typo. But no, it only exists here on Underworld's DB, possibly in Vassal as well as a result. But I've always wanted to do something with the word Frighter. So I kind of want to call this like Gale Force Frighters. I think I do. Yeah, this deck's called Gale Force Frighters. That's what we're doing. Okay, so we have a good name, and therefore I must end the show and get back to the workday. So thank you a ton for watching. As always, you can find this deck list as well as all other deck lists covered on What the Decks over on the Battle Mallet. Definitely recommend heading over there. Their library is just an invaluable tool to the community, and I'm honored to be able to be a part of it. With the What the Decks builds, I'm honored to have them hosted there. And you can best reach me in the comments below or on the Mortal Realms Discord. You can check out all the Mortal Realms Network has to offer, including a link to our Discord at themortalrealms.com. Again, thank you for watching. Hope to see you next week. I've been Skylar, and this has been What the Decks.